Hello, fourth grade students. It's me, Miss Cheddar. I'm here to teach you your last week of reading, which is so sad. And it's so sad that we're not together for it, but I'm excited to be the one to get to do it. So, last week, if you can remember, Miss Wilger taught you guys about figurative language. That was our reading skill for the week. And just like if we were in school, we're going to keep that skill for another week and practice it one more time. So, I'm going to go over it with you again, but before we do that, let me go through our learning target. So a learning target, remember, this is what I want you to learn by the end of this lesson. I want you to learn and know. And it says, I can identify and create examples of figurative language. And I wrote some other words underneath the learning target just to kind of help us understand it. So to identify something is to find it. So I'm going to have you find examples of figurative language this week. You're going to read a paragraph and you're going to have to say, oh, here's an example of this figurative language, or here's an example of this figurative language. This week you're also going to create your own examples. And so to create something is just to make it. So you're going to have to come up with your own examples of certain types of figurative language. And those examples are going to be just that. They're going to be the different types of figurative language, which I'm going to go through with you again today. But before we do that, let's remind ourselves what figurative language is. So figurative language is not the literal meaning, or it's not even a true meaning. And we use it in writing and we use it in speech and reading because it makes our writing more interesting. It makes it more fun to read. And when something is not literal, so remember, literal is means something different than what I'm actually saying. And so that's what figurative language is. It's something that isn't the true meaning. And I have an example down here, and I know Miss Wilger gave you an example last week too. The example I wrote is, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. And that's figurative language because I can't actually eat a horse. I'm not going to actually eat a horse, but I'm using figurative language, and what it means is actually just that I'm really hungry. And so figurative language is that it doesn't mean the literal sense, which would be exactly what I say, but instead it's the figurative sense where it has kind of a special meaning or a hidden meaning. And we learn those, and it helps us understand what we're reading. So this is an example. Miss Wilger gave you an example last week too of it's raining cats and dogs. So that doesn't mean that it's actually cats and dogs are actually falling from the sky. It just means it's raining really hard. So figurative language is that kind of hidden meaning, a different meaning than what it actually means. And we went over 5 types of figurative language with you last week, and I'm going to review those 5 types with you, and we're also going to talk about just coming up with our own, and we're going to also go through a paragraph today where we'll identify some figurative language within the paragraph. All right, here we go. All right, if you would like to take some notes with me, you can go ahead and pause the video and go get your skill book. For my students, you can go to page 85, or for Miss Wilger and Miss Hills, you can just flip. It should be near the back of your book, this little chart. And I'm going to use this to give over here, it says meaning. I'm going to give the definition of each of these 5 types of figurative language, and then we're going to think about some examples of what we could write for them as well. So let's go through each of these. So the first one is simile, and maybe you can just think in your brain right now and think, okay, what did Miss Wilger say a simile was last week? And then we're going to go ahead and write the definition over here by meaning first. So a simile is a comparison using the word like or the word as. So a simile is when you compare 2 things and it has the word like or as in the comparison. So you could think right now, like, what are 2 things you could compare? 2 things that have something in common, and then make that comparison. So one that I've done in the past is I say, my friend is as fast as a cheetah. Has the word as in there twice, actually. So I'm comparing a friend and a cheetah. So that's the comparison part. I'm comparing these 2. I'm saying that they're both fast, and I'm using the word as in this example. which makes it a simile. So you can write this one, or if you want, you can try to come up with your own. I know Miss Wilger, I think, did one yesterday about, or last week about, a girl is as tall as a giraffe. So just think of two things that you can compare and just make sure it has that word like or as in it for that comparison. I'm also going to draw a little picture with each of these, and I'm just going to be honest with you right now. I always tell my students I'm not a good artist, but it just helps me remember kind of what I'm doing and gives a little bit of a visual to it. So here's my cheetah going super fast. So my friend is as fast as a cheetah. The next one is a metaphor, and these two are really, really similar. In fact, they're very similar because a metaphor is a comparison as well, but it's a comparison without the word like or as. So if it has the word like or as in it, that makes it a simile. So a metaphor doesn't have those words. So same thing, you can think of, okay, what's two things I can compare? And then don't put the word like or as in there. So the example I often think of is the student was a star. And again, this is figurative language because I'm not saying that student is actually a star. That just means she's smart or he's smart. And so I'm comparing the student to a star, and this time I didn't put like or as. I could say the student was as bright as a star, and that would be a simile because it has the word as in it. But I didn't do that this time because I wanted to write a metaphor. And so that's the difference between a simile and a metaphor. The simile has like or as, metaphor does not have like or as. I'm going to draw a little star. For the next one, it's idiom. And idioms are a phrase with a non-literal meaning. So a phrase is just a group of words. So it's a group of words that doesn't mean whatever it's saying. It doesn't have the literal meaning. Instead, there's kind of that figurative meaning, that hidden meaning. And idioms are ones that you kind of just have to learn them. You have to know them. You get exposed to them in reading and different things, and you kind of start to learn what they mean. So the example Miss Wilger gave last week of it's raining cats and dogs, that's an example of an idiom. It's a phrase, it's several words put together, and it doesn't mean that cats and dogs are actually falling from the sky. It has that hidden meaning, that figurative meaning of it's raining really hard. Another example of them would be spilled the beans. Maybe you've heard that example before. So I'm going to say Maria spilled the beans about the surprise party. And you can start thinking in your brain like, okay, what does that mean? What does it mean to spill the beans? It's figurative language. It doesn't have that literal meaning. So we're not talking about actually beans going all over the place here. Instead, spilled the beans is an idiom, which means that you accidentally told something you weren't supposed to. You maybe told a secret. In this case, you told about the surprise party. So spilling the beans is an idiom that has that hidden meaning. And again, you kind of just have to learn these. You have to know them by getting exposed to them through reading and different things. So a simile is that comparison. It has like or as. A metaphor is also a comparison, but without like or as. And an idiom is a group of words that has a non-literal meaning. It has a figurative meaning, and you kind of just have to learn them. I'm going to draw a little balloon. All right, two more. And again, if you need a pause, if you're taking these notes and you want to pause in between so that you can make sure you get everything down, go ahead and do that if I'm going too quickly. The next one is personification. This is one we've done a lot in writing, so I hope that you know what it means. But personification is giving human qualities to an object or a non-human thing. So again, we use this a lot in writing where we give those human qualities, whether it's an action that a human does, like I think Miss Wilger's last week was about the sun touching something. Sun It doesn't have fingers, it doesn't have hands, it can't touch something, so that's figurative language. It's personification. It's giving a human quality to something that's not human. It can be even just giving a gender to something that doesn't have a gender. Like often in writing, we'll do that. If you're writing about a piece of nature, you might call it a he or a she, and that's personification. The example I like to give for this one is the flower, or we'll say flowers, danced in the wind. So again, this is personification. Flowers can't actually dance. That's not a literal meaning. Instead, it's a figurative meaning. It just means that the flowers were probably moving back and forth in the wind. So we'd call that personification. So this one we use a lot in writing. It makes our writing really good. Here's my flower. All right, we're on our last one, hyperbole. This one's kind of my favorite. This is one that we use a lot just in our speech. And a hyperbole is an extreme means big, exaggeration. An extreme exaggeration. So the example I gave earlier about I'm so hungry I could eat a horse, that's an example of a hyperbole. I can't actually eat a whole horse. I'm just exaggerating to get my point across that I'm really, really hungry. So we do this a lot where we say things are, like I think Miss Wilger gave one last year. A lot of times we do it with time. We're like, oh, I've been waiting here 1,000,000 years. And it's like, no, it obviously hasn't actually been 1,000,000 years. That's hyperbole. It's an exaggeration to just say, I've been waiting here a really long time. So the example that I was going to give was this backpack weighs 1,000,000 pounds. So we might say that about something we're carrying, like, oh my gosh, like this is super, super heavy, and we give an exaggeration like it weighs 1,000,000 pounds. It doesn't actually weigh 1,000,000 pounds. We're just trying to say it's really heavy. And I'm just gonna be honest with you guys right now. I practiced doing this, and I'm really sorry because this doesn't look like a backpack, but I tried my best. Okay, so those are your 5 types of figurative language that we're focusing on. Figurative language, remember, is that not the literal meaning. They have a different meaning, and you kind of just have to learn them. And so similes are comparisons. You compare 2 things, and you use like or as. Metaphors are comparisons, but you don't use like or as. Idioms is a phrase that has a non-literal meaning, and those you kind of just have to learn with time. Personification is when you give a human quality to something that's not human. So, for example, like dancing or, all those different actions, but also, again, you could do like the gender, things like that. And then hyperbole is an extreme exaggeration. So that's where we say something in a really extreme way just to make a point, and it's a type of figurative language. So I hope you took notes on these. That's just kind of what I wanted to do to review them. This week you're going to have to identify these in a paragraph, and you're also going to have to write some of your own, I think, similes and metaphors. So you could pull this out to help you when you're doing those different things, and that could be good. Right now I'm going to go through a paragraph with you, and we're going to identify some of these figurative language, and then we will be done. Okay, here's an example of a paragraph that I'm going to read to you, and it has those 5 different types of figurative language within the paragraph. So as I read, see if you can even point them out on your own. According to legend, Pecos Bill fell from a covered wagon and was raised by coyotes. He grew up to be the best cowhand in the West. One day, a mean-spirited cyclone threatened to tear out the grass and scatter Bill's cattle to the ends of the earth. Mad as a hornet, Bill grabbed the cyclone by the tail and swung it high into the sky. The stormy sea of grass turned smooth. I made short work of that, Twister, he said. So hopefully you can already kind of just start thinking of, all right, what types of figurative language are in here? Maybe you even notice there's one of each, so you can even start thinking, like, where is there a simile where it compares 2 things using like or as? Where is there a metaphor where they're comparing something without like or as? And just kind of find those different ones. Here they are. So a simile from this paragraph was mad as a hornet. That was comparing bill, and a hornet, and both of them as mad, and it has the word as in it. The metaphor was the stormy sea of grass. The grass can't actually be a stormy sea, but that's a metaphor. It's a comparison without like or as. The idiom was made short work of, which is an example of a phrase that doesn't have that literal meaning. The personification was calling it a mean-spirited cyclone. A lot of times in writing they use nature or natural disasters and they might give them emotions like mean-spirited, but a cyclone can't be mean-spirited, so that would be an example of personification. And then the last one, the hyperbole, was to the ends of the earth, and we talked about that earlier, where a lot of times they'll use time as their exaggeration, and so it's not actually going to go to the ends of the earth. That's just a hyperbole. They're using exaggeration there. So these, again, are just to kind of give you some examples, especially from one paragraph. And so this week, as, again, you're looking at your worksheet, there will be a paragraph that you're supposed to read, and then you'll have to say the different types of figurative language. Okay, fourth graders, I hope that was helpful to you and will be helpful for you this week. So let me go back to my learning target. Remember, this is what I wanted you to learn by the end of this lesson. So I want you to be able to identify, be able to find different types of figurative language, and I also want you to be able to create your own examples of figurative language. And we're going to ask you to do that this week. You can use your notes that we took to help you with those different activities, and you can always email me or Miss Wilger or Miss Hills, and we'd be glad to help you with any questions you have regarding it. All right, we love you guys so much. I miss you, and I hope you're staying safe.